Hello. In a couple of weeks' time, on the 4th of April, it will be the traditional Chinese festival of Qingming. This is an important date, and indeed one of the three major traditional Chinese festivals, alongside the Dragon Boat Festival, 端午节, and the Mooncake Festival, 中秋节, that are still widely celebrated today. Slightly different from other festivals, Qingming is not just a day of festival activities, but also one of the 24 centric dates in the lunar calendar, an important system of dates of reference in keeping the calendar and calculations of the right time in relation to certain activities or events. This is a table of all the 24 such dates, what we call 节气 in Chinese, in a year. The dates on the chart may differ by 1 or 2 days depending on different years. As you can see, it starts with the start of the spring, called Li Chun, and ends with the deepest of the winter, Da Han. Every season there are 6 of them. For thousands of years, people would rely on these days to plan the whole year, especially agriculturally, when to grow crops, when to harvest, when to take a break, etc. And Qingming is one of them. We know that the Li Chun signaled the start of the spring, and similarly, the Chinese New Year, also known as the Spring Festival, is closely associated with the beginning of the spring, also the beginning of a new year. But we all know that in late January or February, when these dates fall, in reality, it would be nothing like spring. It is usually still extremely cold, actually probably the coldest time of the year, and trees and grass haven't woken up and turned green yet. We will have to wait for a few more weeks, until late March and early April, when the spring would fully return, when everything becomes green and flowers are in blossom. This is exactly when Qingming falls. So traditionally, this festival is associated with the coming of the full spring, when families gather together and often go away for an outing to get close to Mother Nature. Meanwhile, it also naturally follows that it would be a good time to pay a visit to the burial ground of our ancestors, to show our respect and remember them. So going to such places and cleaning the tombstones and around is yet another important element of activities on this day. Therefore, this day is also often referred to as the tomb sweeping day. Okay, so this is a short introduction of the Qingming date in China, which is the title of today's poem. We should know straight away that this is a poem about this important date. The author is Du Mu, a famous poet in the late Tang period. We've learned one of his poems before, 山行, and the 双叶红于二月花, if you still remember. Du Mu was very talented and at the same time also wealthy and trendy and fashionable in lifestyle. So, although the period he lived in was really a terrible one, in that the Tang Empire was full of holes, getting weaker by the day, and soon to collapse, Du Fu's poems were rarely pessimistic, but instead they were often only contemplative and philosophical, and sometimes contained a lot of fun and joyous things in life, and the vibrancy of life itself. This poem, Qingming, is without any doubt the most famous poem ever written for this occasion. Let's read it together first. 清明，清明时节雨纷纷，路上行人欲断魂。借问酒家何处有？牧童遥指杏花村。时 means time, and 节 means festival. And 时节 is just a broad reference to time or period. So 清明时节 could mean the exact day of Qingming, but could also mean, more broadly, the days around this festival, maybe between 10 days before and after the actual date. That is, as said before, in late March to early April. In many parts of China, it is a time when there is often rains, sometimes day after day, not big rains, but non-stop, like drizzles, keeping falling and keeping everything wet. That is what 雨纷纷 means. 雨 is rain, and 纷纷 just means a lot, non-stop. What is the consequence of this? It's 路上行人欲断魂. We probably all have such experience that when it rains without stop, we would grow very anxious and agitated. It's so annoying. Well, I think the British weather has often made us feel that way. So with this rain, the 行人, the travelers on the road, 路上行人, they 欲断魂. 欲 means about to almost get to. 断 means to break, to sever. And 魂 means to the soul. So these travelers, they are so annoyed, so disheartened, so phased and dazed by this rain, they have almost severed their souls. They have almost become soulless. This is half exaggeration, but half truth, and is presented vividly. As I said, we all had such experience of being annoyed by rain. So this description of the extent of the annoyance, of the feel that even the soul is about to leave our body, is very real. Now there is more space for imagination here. As we said before, a lot of what the poet intended are not explicitly written, but we need to think and imagine beyond what's on paper to get it in full. These travelers possibly get annoyed not just by the rain, do they? It's Qingming. It's a date for families to gather together and do things together. But why are these people on the road? Where are they going? How far is left for them? Probably still quite far. That's why they are so annoyed. They were not very happy in the first place for not being able to unite with their families on this date. And now this never-stopping rain just adds frustration. And that's why they 欲断魂. After 欲断魂, what's the response? These travelers would like to take a rest, perhaps in a pub, to have a drink, to relax and warm up a bit. 借 means to borrow. But here is just something in a courteous manner. 问 is to ask. So 借问 means, may I ask? 酒家 is pub or restaurant. Literally, 酒 means wine and 家 means home. In the ancient days, it was very common, with a flag easily seen from a distance, mainly selling wines or spirit, and often selling food as well. Even today, if you go to any city in China or any Chinatown outside China and walk along the street, you will find a lot of restaurants calling themselves something 酒家, like these, for example. You have this 酒家 and this 酒家, and this one is actually from London. This word has just become a glorified term for restaurant. 和 means which, what. 处 means place. 有 means to have. So the travelers are asking around, is there any pubs around here? Who did they ask? It's in the last line, 牧童. 牧 means to shepherd. 童 is a child. So 牧童 means a child shepherd. 遥 means far away. 指 means to point to. So 遥指 is to point to something from afar. What is he pointing to? 杏花村. So this child shepherd didn't answer him verbally, but instead only pointed to a place in the far distance. The 杏花村, village, in a bunch of apricot flowers. 村 is village, and 杏花, the apricot flowers, which is one of the most popular flowers in the spring that the Chinese people love. Alongside, for example, 桃花, 梨花, and 樱花, plum flowers, and plum flower and cherry blossom and peach flowers. A village surrounded by the beautiful apricot flowers, and in it there is a pub. All these images are very pleasant, and they provide comfort and ease, and offer some bright hope for these travelers. The poem then stops here, ending with this hope and brightness, and is indeed very spirit-lifting. There is a lot to be dug here to understand this poem better and further appreciate how masterful Du Mu was in his writing. For example, the last line, it instantly creates a sharp contrast. We said quite a few times before that showing contrasting qualities is one of the most important techniques in the Chinese poetry. And in fact, in all art form everywhere in general, music, painting, etc. Here, the 牧童 is a child, a young and lively being, carefree and happy, and by referring to him or her as a shepherd, we could possibly deduce he or she might be sitting on top of a buffalo, which is completely opposite of some tired, moody, and distressful travelers. And the rain is just right there, in front of everybody on the spot, something that causes all this distress, and is contrasted against something beautiful and desirable far away, the pub in Xinhua Cun. With these kinds of contrasts, the poem becomes much more interesting, more artistic, and can more easily move its readers. What else can we figure out from this poem? The travelers asked the shepherd a question, but the shepherd only answered with a gesture. Why didn't he answer them directly? Well, chances are, wherever they were, it was a busy place, and there were groups and groups of travelers passing by, and they may all ask the same question. So after the shepherd answered a few times, he just knew what would be asked of him, and could simply smile and point to places. Well, I actually made all this up, but it is very likely to be true, isn't it? Isn't it much fun to dig much into a poem in such a way? In fact, there are many other fun aspects of this poem. For example, this poem could be easily rearranged into a short play with all the necessary materials directly from the original words. We have the time, Qingming, and we have the setting, which is a rainy day. We have places, some road and a village, in apricot flowers, and we have people, the travelers and the shepherd. We have dialogues and reactions, the inquiry and answer, etc. Some good actors and actresses can well put up some great performance to fully represent the scenes described. In ancient Chinese poetry, the grammar is often flexible and takes a free form. And because of that, we are often presented with a pastiche of different subjects and rely on our understanding of the Chinese language to decipher its meaning. Which means, even if you break up the original structure, as long as you have those elements, the meaning is largely the same. In the case of this poem, there has been an attempt to turn it into a structurally different poem, a poem with uneven lines, like this. We can see the meaning is actually largely the same, with some small tweaks, but because the rhythm has changed, 清明时节雨，纷纷路上行人，欲断魂。借问酒家何处有牧童，遥指杏花村. It somehow feels lighter and more jokingly. Another aspect of this wonderful poem which I feel you may find interesting. And last week we mentioned that there is a famous restaurant in Hangzhou, 楼外楼, taking its name from the poem 山外青山楼外楼. This time, because of the popularity of the poem by Du Mu, because of the wonderful scene portrayed by the poet, the name of the venue of Xinhua Cun became something very appealing, especially in recent years because of the commercial value in terms of tourism and marketing of alcoholic drink. There emerged a lot of villages in China that claim to be the authentic Xinhua Cun, which the poem referred to. Now, the reality is that it is almost impossible to find out the truth, but each of these villages presented some evidence to the point that they had to go to the court for arbitration and settlement. There is a Xinhua Cun, this is a map. There is Xinhua Cun in Shanxi, and there is Xinhua Cun in Shanxi, and in Anhui, in Hubei, and in Jiangxi, etc., etc. Some of them got successful in officially registering trademarks using this term Xinhua Cun and have enjoyed tremendous commercial success out of it. So it's interesting to see that a poet 1,000 years ago could single-handedly create such huge wealth nowadays. That's all for today. Thank you.